Hi, my name is Cade Pickford, and I'm here with my father, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy retired Christopher Pickford. I am conducting an interview on my father about what life was like within the years of 2014 to 2016, the same time that he was deployed to Kabul, Afghanistan. I'm going to be looking at major events within the context of 2014 to 2016, different military operations such as Operation Resolute Support, drawdown of U.S. forces, and increased Taliban activity. I'll also be looking at the political developments such as the presidential election of 2014. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, we're going to be looking at motivation and deployment. So, what motivated you to actually join the United States military?
September 11th, so when our country was attacked. At that point I decided that I would go ahead and join up in the military and to fight back. And at that point I was already 32 years old, so I was kind of old to join, and so I decided to join the reserve and fight in that capacity.
When you had got to Afghanistan, can you describe what your initial impressions of Kabul, what it was like when you first got there?
I'd already deployed to Iraq and Kuwait on 2 other deployments, and I expected to see some of the same type of desert. And when I landed in Kandahar, it was exactly like Kuwait and Iraq. And then we flew from Kandahar to Kabul, and everything changed because we were in the top of the mountains. And so it was not desert. It was, I don't want to say there was a lot of tree growth or anything. It was dry, but it was not desert. And we did experience rain, and we experienced snow. So we had change of weather as we were there.
Makes sense. What was a typical day like for you and your boys when you guys were in Kabul, Afghanistan? Like, what type of activities did you guys do?
Well, for starters, we didn't have any days off. So I was there for 2 years straight, and there were no days off. So every day you worked. So every morning, right around 6 a.m., we'd have a briefing, and we'd get an update of everything that took place the day before across the theater. We'd have threats that were coming across for that day, for the day that we were in, and then whatever departments we were in charge of, we had to brief the general on to give them updates on what we were doing. So that was how our day started. From there, we'd go to the office. We usually ran a convoy every day, at least 1, maybe 2. So at that point, since I was in charge of convoys, I'd actually have to go and go to an intel brief and find out what kind of threats we had. Take notes on that. That was usually about 45 minutes long. Come back. We'd go to breakfast. You would definitely do 3 meals a day there at the DFAC. And anyway, after breakfast, we'd go back out, check on the vehicles. We had gun trucks. I'd check with my chief, who was in charge of those, and just make sure that we had the trucks we needed for the convoy, and that they were loaded with fuel and weapons. And the fact is, that was an easy one because my chief was on top of it. He was Romanian. And anyway, he took his job seriously and took care of all that. So once we knew that was taken care of, I'd put a plan together on where the convoy was going, what was the mission. We'd have to submit a route plan, and we'd have to put in position gunners, truck drivers, truck commanders, and whoever else is going on the convoy is a rider. And then based on what our mission was, I'd backfill people into vehicles based on what was needed. And then I'd put that whole plan together, submit it. It would usually take about 2 hours to get an approval. At that point, we'd be running sometime right around maybe 10:30, and we'd go ahead and call for a convoy at that point, and everybody be notified. Usually they were notified the day before to be prepared for a convoy. Now they'd get the actual order that we were going on the convoy. Just before, as they would all go down with all their gear, loading guns on the trucks, and ammo and all the weapons and flashbangs and grenades, everything we needed in case we got in trouble. One of the guys would go to a comms briefing, so they could get the comms briefing on what channel to go to for a 9-line in case there was somebody got hit. And then he'd know what channel to go to if we needed to call an air support. So if we were getting hit and we needed air support, he would know what channel to call in on that. And he'd get that information. At that point, I would go to the final briefing for Intel, and they would give me a final brief before we'd walk out the door, saying what to look for and what threats were on the streets. So they'd give us things like, some of the things that stuck out was that there was one day there was UN vehicles with Taliban in it, and they would have 4,000 pounds of explosive. So, and 4,000 pounds of explosive would take a tank out.
Right.
So that would mean they were in a van or something that could hold that kind of weight. So, anyway, then we'd go on a convoy, but we'd go down and brief the convoy. That would take another 45 minutes. And then we would go and do the convoy. And then when you're on the convoy, that would take between 2 to 4 hours, and it wore you out. You were so vigilant the entire time that by the time you got back from that convoy, you were spent. So usually we'd go grab some food, and at that point we'd go take an hour nap, and then we'd come back and we'd start our evening routine at that point. And usually that's where we would do updates on whatever our jobs were, and kind of try to finish that stuff out for the day, figure out what we were doing for tomorrow. Then we'd have a brief with our lieutenant colonel to give him an update on where things were, and then then we go to dinner, and then right after dinner we'd come back and continue working in the office, and sometime around 10 somebody would say, hey, let's put a movie on. So we would throw a movie on and watch that until midnight, and then we'd go to bed and start the whole day over.
So it's just like a recycle constantly over all the time.
It was Groundhog Day. Every day was the same.
Dang, it's gotta be fun.
Yep.
So you referenced the 9-line in referencing to like calling and everything. What exactly is a 9-line?
So a 9-line is if our convoy got hit and somebody was injured, and we needed to get a helo in to medevac them out. A 9-line is a military term, and it actually is 9 numbers, and we would have it printed on our dash and taped there. And the first thing would be, how many people were injured. And so you could say, line 1, line 2, leg, line 3, not life-threatening.
Right.
Line 4, and that's how you would do it, all the way down. And I mean, it got a lot of details, so that by the time the helicopter showed up, they'd have the 9-line already, and the medic would know what he's doing, who he's treating, right down to if it was an American, Romanian, allied nation,
right,
or Afghani,
right,
or Taliban, because we could call a 9-line for a Taliban that we thought was dying and we wanted to save them.
Right.
So.
Okay, that makes sense. Dang. What could you describe your primary responsibilities and duties were while you were there though, and going every day? So as you referenced something about being a convoy commander, and as a lieutenant commander, were you someone who was the convoy commander every time, or?
So the problem with Afghanistan was there was a drawdown that took place, and when that happened, we suddenly started wearing everybody's hats. And I literally had what we call a handover turnover with 14 different guys. That means 14 guys who had jobs there, full-time jobs, gave me their jobs. Now I had to take those 14 jobs and say, what makes sense? I can't do all 14 jobs.
Yeah. So
I would do parts of each one of those jobs. And my main job again was convoys. So I couldn't give that up.
Right.
So I would add other things to it. I became a contracting officer. I was in charge of contracts for language and literacy. I was in charge of about $4 billion worth of assets that we were going to hand over to the Afghan army. So these are the kind of the jobs that you had, and you had so many of them that there were times that you were like, oh, I forgot I even had that job, because the priority didn't exist.
Right. So with all that going on, how did you and your fellow soldiers maintain morale and like stay connected with home and everything, as you guys had so many jobs and everything like that?
Well, the beauty of modern day warfare is I can call home anytime. I mean, so it didn't matter. We had landline phones that we could just connect and I could call to Yorktown Naval Weapons Station, and then they would transfer me to Gloucester, and then I would have a direct line, and I could talk, for however long, whatever
Right.
the time permitted. So, and emails, we had access to emails that we could do every day. So the truth is, I think it's actually, in some ways it was good, in some ways it was bad. In World War II, these guys went off for 4 years, and they never communicated with home except for letters that would take a month or two to get to them.
Right.
And it's hard to explain, but when you're in a combat zone, your brain needs to be in the combat zone. It can't be at home.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. When I was in Iraq, I called your mom from the flight line, middle of the night, probably 11:30 at night. It's dark outside. I got the satellite phone. I'm by myself on the flight line, and I'm calling your mom, and she's complaining about one of you kids. Oh, they won't listen, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry to hear that. And there's an attack that happens while I'm on the phone. And I literally am watching this attack, and I'm like, well, there's an attack happening right now, but they're kind of like 2 miles away.
Right, yeah.
And I don't need to go yet. So it was surreal, right? Because you're connected to home, and then she's like, well, I need you to yell at your son right now. And it's like, I gotta go because I'm gonna die. So I really gotta go. And no one in World War II experienced that.
Right.
And so it's hard to explain how you hang the phone up and then go grab your gun and go defend yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And I can tell you there's a lot of mental stuff in your head to survive. You need to be mentally sharp.
Right.
Now there's times that you need a break, but that break normally isn't calling home, getting in a fight with your wife or yelling at your kids.
Right.
Not the break you need.
Right in the heat of combat and stuff.
So anyway.
Do you think this is like some guys though that can like handle that and like they take it a lot easier, or do you think like they have to be in combat all the time and they can't like split their mind, they can't prioritize combat over family or stuff like that?
I think everybody addresses it differently. It's like going into combat. You need to know what works for you. You need to know what's the best for you. And I believe what was best for me was, hey, in Band of Brothers they talked about it. Lieutenant Spears talked about it, and he said, your problem is you think you're going to make it. As soon as you realize you're already dead, you can start operating in this theater. And there's a lot of truth to that. And the problem is if you take on that mentality, you have a really good chance of surviving the war. Then the problem comes in when the war ends, you have a bigger problem on the backside.
Okay.
And I experienced that myself. So I can attest to that. So those that I think didn't need to say, hey, I'm dead already so I can operate, maybe they did better to fall back to civilian world.
Okay.
So if that makes sense.
Can you share like a particularly memorable or impactful experience from your time there? Something that like maybe you enjoyed besides going through all the hassle of being like convoy commander and taking on so many other jobs. So something that you really liked?
The camaraderie. The camaraderie you get with the people you go in a convoy with every day. When you go into a combat zone with a group of people, you become very tight with that group of people because you have to count on them. And if there's somebody in that group that you can't count on, they're going to be kicked out of the group.
Right.
And we did that. We got rid of people that we didn't
deemed
trust.
like a liability almost.
Yeah, if you don't trust the guy to watch your back, then you've got to watch your front and your back,
Right.
and you can't do both.
Well,
So
do you have like an example of something where that happened, or?
we had a guy who was an Air Force major who was in the turret of an MRAP, and the guys in the turret, they're the only guys that can shoot.
Right.
So I'm in an MRAP. I was a truck commander. We had another guy who was new, who was training to be the convoy commander. So he was the convoy commander and the truck commander of the truck in front of me.
Okay.
And this major was in the turret, and he literally was up there taking pictures with a camera. And I'm on the radio going, hey, Cobra One, you might want to get your turret guy more engaged, because at the end of the day, you don't want to look like you're a tourist traveling through Kabul.
Right.
You want to look like you're vigilant, because they're always watching you. And if they see an opportunity to kill you, they're going to take it. And if you're up there with a camera, that's a great opportunity to launch an RPG into the side of that thing.
Right.
And it could kill everybody in that vehicle. So we're all going to die because he's up there dilly-dallying.
Right.
And when we addressed it with him, because there's other problems we've had, and we addressed it with somebody, and they say, oh, roger that, I understand, I won't do it again. He did not.
Right.
He said, where was the threat? I didn't see it. I don't think that was a legitimate threat. And we finally said, dude, if you're not going to get on board, you're gone. You're not on our convoys. And we were already short-staffed. And we'd rather go out short than have that guy with us.
Wow.
So we did, and he never went on another convoy.
Yeah.
So.
How did your unit respond to the increased Taliban activity during your deployment? So as you guys were going out in convoys, did you see a lot more like Taliban groups around you, or?
Yeah, it was funny because Kabul was the capital of Afghanistan, and if you talk to people that had been there even 2 years before we were, they would say, oh, did you go to the restaurant in Kabul? And you'd say, what? What are you talking about? We don't get out of our trucks. We're not going to a restaurant. You're going to die. Well, they were there when there was 140,000 troops. Mm-hmm. And they had Kabul cordoned off and no one could get in. There was a green zone. And those people could walk around like there was no issue.
Right.
Once we did the drawdown, all we did was pull all our troops back from everywhere and pull them into Kabul and to Kandahar and to Bagram. And those were the 3 spots that we had.
Right.
The Taliban then starts taking over the country, and now they're trying to infiltrate Kabul because it's the biggest city, it's the easiest to get into, and they can kill Americans.
Right.
So now they're going to drive little Toyota Corollas around the streets with 400 pounds of explosive,
right. Yeah.
looking for a convoy to hit.
Makes sense.
So.
How did you interact with the local Afghan population? What were those interactions usually like though? So besides people that, well, obviously Taliban, and people were just walking around on the streets or something, and you didn't know for sure, but how did you react with them?
Not a lot of interaction with the average person on the street. We viewed everyone as a threat.
Right.
We saw everyone as the Taliban. Now that being said, we also had a mission there. We were there to train, advise, assist the Afghan army and police. So we would run convoys, and we'd have interpreters, right? We'd have Afghan interpreters with us, and we liked them, but we never trusted them. We never brought them into our MRAPs,
right?
Until we all hugged them, oh, Bean, it's so good to see you, and we're all feeling for bombs to see if he's got explosives on him.
Yeah.
I don't know that he ever figured that out. But he would then go with us, and we'd go see these Afghan generals, and we'd talk to them, and he would be the interpreter, and we would have those conversations on me trying to pass over all this equipment to them,
right?
And then them arguing about how it's not all clean or not new enough for him, and he's not going to sign it today. And I'm like, so we're going to risk our lives to come back at her tomorrow? Gotcha, okay. But the average public, no interaction with the average public. Our interaction with the average public would be driving a convoy through the city of Kabul, and it's a city, high-rise buildings, there's nowhere to get away. If somebody blows you up, you can't pull off a road somewhere,
right? Yeah.
Right? There's ditches on each side and in the buildings. And so our interaction there would be if we came up on a protest, right? And we don't want to be sitting still, so we just start throwing flashbangs out of the turret.
Right, yeah.
To disperse the crowd.
Right.
Now, flashbang isn't going to kill anyone.
Right.
It's just going to scare them.
Right, yeah.
And then we also had an airsoft gun zip tied to our 240 Bravo machine gun that was hooked to a car battery, and we could shoot airsoft BBs. Now these would penetrate your skin, so they'd hurt.
Right.
But they wouldn't kill you. So that was our non-lethal defense that we would use to do this. I mean, it brings up a story where one day we came across a big crowd by a mosque. We threw some flashbangs, they dispersed. We see this bonfire in the parking lot. Don't know really what's going on with that. Get back to NKC, New Kabul compound where we lived. And we see on the news that some Afghan woman was burned alive at the mosque. And we just drove right by it. We saw it and didn't know what was happening. Because if we had, I probably would have shot the woman to put her out of her misery.
Right, yeah.
But we didn't know what was going on, and you just don't interact with them.
Right, understandable. While you were there, can you describe like any cultural differences you observed and how they like affected your own experience compared to like America and being in Kabul, Afghanistan and everything?
Sure, that's a great question. The fact is, whatever makes sense here is the reverse there. Nothing made sense. Nothing was the same, which is why I don't think any of them should come here.
Right.
Because they're not gonna, it's not fair to them, and it sure isn't fair to us. Because they're not gonna fit in.
Right.
And they're gonna hate it. And they're gonna rebel against it. And then their kids are gonna end up being terrorists in this country.
Right.
Because we're not the same. We're just not. Culturally, we're so different. They have no problem having sex with little boys. That's a big deal here.
Right.
Right? We literally had to go through training about that to say we can't interfere. And I'm thinking, man, if I see that, someone's getting shot.
Right.
Never saw it myself, but we know it happened. They were having sex with goats. The culture doesn't exist here.
Right.
It doesn't cross over.
That makes sense. How did the drawdown of U.S. forces, like, besides obviously making you have to like take on more jobs, how did it play with the other guys as well? Did they have to take on even more jobs besides just you?
Yeah, we all had to take on jobs. I mean, we'd all take on 14 jobs or something. I mean, if there was any benefit, I guess, we all knew we were in it together. Like, it was a small group.
Right.
I mean, we went from 140 down to like 14,000. That's not many people.
Right.
In 3 cities. And you needed each other to survive. I mean, to give you an idea, we'd go on a convoy and you would think we were armed to the teeth. I mean, I'd have an M4 rifle and I'd have probably 30 magazines going across my chest of 30 rounds each. It's a lot of ammo. It's weighed a lot.
Right.
Right? I'd have at least 6 magazines for my 9mm pistol. We'd have about 30 cans of 240 Bravo ammo, 7.62 rounds, and cans of grenades and flashbangs. And a new guy would get in and say, wow, man, we got all the ammo in the world. And then we point out, there's 2 million people in Kabul. We're not going to kill them all. If they want us to die, we're going to die.
Right.
So,
save that last bullet for yourself, I guess.
Yeah, that's what the 9mm rounds are for.
What was your reaction to vital events such as like the death of Major General Green?
Major General Green, I actually worked for the guy because I was a contracting officer. It affected us. He was the highest ranked person killed. I mean, I remember the day that it took place. It's a convoy out to the British base, Karga, which is the Afghan West Point, and they were out visiting that. I knew all these guys that were with them. It was a mission that I could have been on, but usually when you're talking about brass that high, that's not a mission that you want to go on. So I got out of that mission.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, the guys that went, you got to see that rank doesn't mean anything. The security guardian angels for that were the Danes, and they literally said, "All right, we're doing our convoy brief," and then when they were leaving Karga, they said, "All right, we're going to get in our trucks and we're going to do a convoy brief, an exit convoy brief on the radios." If it had been anybody else, they all would have gotten the vehicles and left. Major General Green said, "Negative, we're going to do it right here."
Mm-hmm.
And they got a little horseshoe at the west point of Afghanistan and had a brief. One of the guys there, the Afghans, sees them, takes an opportunity to open up with his AK from about 3 stories up, and he starts wasting people. He killed Major General Green. He wounded this other general that I worked for, a German general. And at least 2 friends of mine were wounded there in that same gunfire.
Right.
Nowhere to hide. You were in a parking lot that was all gravel, white gravel.
Right.
Nowhere to hide. The Danes, man, awesome dudes, took off running, went straight into the building, ran up to the top floor, kicked the door in, shot the dude in the face, and threw him out the window.
Wow.
Right? Tough guys.
Right.
But they told me later that they were intimidated because it was a major general that told them, "We're going to brief here." They were in charge of security.
Right.
They should have overrode him and said, "Negative. Don't misunderstand your rank with my authority.
Right.
I'm in charge of security. We're doing it my way." It's what they should have done. They didn't.
Now, why do you think Major General Green wanted to get out and do the briefing instead of doing it over radio, do it in person, huddled in a group? Do you think it was lack of understanding? Because as a Major General, wouldn't you think he may have understood the consequences of that and jeopardizing the other men as well?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I technically worked for Major General Green, and I'd met him maybe twice. I didn't know him personally on a personal level. I don't know. So anything I say is conjecture. I
Right.
couldn't get into his brain and know him well enough to say this is why he did what he did. If I was going to guess, I think he was trying to show the Afghans, the generals that we advise and those guys, that we're not scared. Right? We're not scared that they're going to shoot us. We're not going to, have our allies shoot us, even though it happened all the time.
Right.
Right? He wanted to prove that he wasn't afraid of that. Well, he paid the price for that.
Right.
That's my only guess, and that was a conversation that I had with the Danish officer that was in charge of security that day, and he felt that was why. So.
Makes sense. How effective do you believe Operation Resolute Support was in achieving its goals?
Okay, so I was there for Operation Enduring Freedom, and then it rotated over to Operation Resolute Support. President Obama basically got on the news and said, "Hey, combat operations are over," and we're watching this live in Afghanistan.
Right.
And of course we said, "Well, hey, can someone tell the Taliban that that's the case?" So besides us getting a new patch on our sleeve that said Resolute Support instead of NATO training mission Afghanistan,
Right.
there was no difference. We saw absolutely zero. No change in anything. Taliban didn't care.
Dang. What were the strategic priorities during your deployment, and how did they evolve as your deployment progressed forward?
Honestly, it's a tough thing to say strategic goals. I mean, by the time I'm there, we've already gotten Osama bin Laden. That was the whole reason to go.
Right.
So the only reason we were still there was because we didn't want it to turn back to the Taliban, which obviously history showed us that it did.
Right.
So all these lives that were lost, I mean, in the time period I was there, we lost at least 19 guys in our unit. 19 guys thrown away because nothing happened. We didn't better Afghanistan. We didn't, if anything, we handed over all these vehicles, MRAPs and Stryker vehicles, to the Taliban. And we knew that's what was happening. We knew it before the fall of Kabul. So I knew it when I was there. And then 5 years later, Kabul falls.
Right.
And everybody thought it happened like we didn't have enough time to get the stuff out. That's not true. We handed everything over to them long before it ever fell. So strategically, I can't say that we had any strategic mission that we were there. Our goal was just to give them all the free stuff we could and hope we didn't die doing it.
Right.
And that never changed from day one until the day I left. So,
as you were going on convoys, what was like the most memorable convoy that you remember going on? Something that like really impacted you, that really sticks with you in your memory to this day?
I don't know. There's quite a few convoys that stick with me to this day.
Something that could be like sad or scary or something that just...
Well, there was a lot of scary ones. When we first got there, we were driving up armored Land Cruisers, which you couldn't shoot back from.
Right.
And we thought we were safe, and then we realized we weren't. We realized that 400 pounds of explosive will cut one in half, throw your body in the street, and blow your clothes off, and you're dead.
Right.
And we saw it. We saw it happen. The ROTC professor at Liberty University, it happened to him, and I was there, and I saw his body on the street. And I didn't know that was him until later, but I literally did. I saw his body on the street, and I saw that his clothes had been blown off, and I thought, we're not safe here.
Right.
This is not safe. That same day, the roads turned black, and they said no one's going out. And we had a convoy that we were supposed to go on. And now I immediately was like, all right, convoy's canceled. And then this German general that we work for comes in and says, Chris, the convoy's on. And I said, there's nothing we're doing out there that's worth us dying for.
Right.
And we're the only convoy that's going to be on the streets. And Intel had briefed that there were 4 suicide bombers driving around, and one of them had just blown up and killed 2 Americans and 2 Allied service members right outside the gate of NKC.
Yep.
And he said it's on. So I can tell you that that was a mission that I went upstairs, and I didn't know fear until that day, and I was sure we were going to die. I was sure of it. And I had to go upstairs in my room, and I remember looking in the mirror, and I got tears in my eyes, and I'm thinking, I'm going to die, man. This is it. I'd already written letters to all my kids, written a letter to my wife, and that was long before that. But I pulled them all out and set them on the desk so that they were there.
Right.
And anyway, I threw up in the sink. And then I slapped myself in the face a couple times and said, you're the convoy commander. You can't go downstairs and look like you're scared to death.
Right, yeah.
And that is where the whole, you think you're going to make it. You're already dead.
Right.
And I had to give that speech to myself. And I went downstairs, and I could see it in everyone's face. And they were scared to death.
Yeah.
And I motivated them. And we went on a convoy. And we survived it. And to this day, I remember it. I remember the fear of not thinking I could die. I literally thought, we will die.
Right.
And we're going to go anyway. And the mission was so not important, I don't remember what it was.
Right.
It was nothing. It was absolutely nothing mission.
Just another turnover
Just
of
another
random vehicles.
stupid mission, probably to go talk to the Afghan army about language and literacy, because I was in charge of that contract too.
Right.
It meant nothing. Whatever we were going to do, nothing got accomplished that day, except for we lived. And that's the day that we said, we can't drive around in these Toyotas anymore. And we were able to acquire MRAPs. And that changed everything. Then it went from, oh my God, we're going to die, to, where's the Taliban at? Let's go find the Taliban.
Right.
And so that's how the rest of the missions went. So every mission after that was, we want to go out and we want to find the Taliban. And I remember missions that we went on that we were doing something else, and we got a radio call that said, hey, there's some Taliban activity over on route something.
Right.
And we changed everything to end up on that route.
Right.
Because we wanted to engage them. So that's the night and day difference between having the right equipment and not.
Makes sense. What do you though feel like changed that type of mentality though? Do you feel like was it something like different equipment, different soldiers, or was it something
The equipment, the same people.
Same people?
We had the exact same people. Nothing changed there. We had the same people and the equipment. Now we're driving in pretty much tanks, wheeled tanks. And I mean, I had a suicide bomber pull up next to me in one of those and detonate. If I'd been in a Toyota, I'd be dead.
Right.
All it did was rock the truck, kill the engine. We started the engine again and drove away, and there was a hole in the ground. And you said, wow, man, if we were in Toyotas, we'd be dead.
Uh-huh.
So that's how much space we had in the MRAP. And we had the best MRAP. We had a MAT V, which is basically a 4-person MRAP with a turret for a gunner.
Right.
So.
Well, final question though. Do you feel like everything that you and your boys did in Afghanistan, do you feel like you guys succeeded at that mission? Do you feel more confident that everything you did was for the betterment, or how do you feel about it really?
Well, let's see, the Taliban's running Afghanistan and they're driving around in MRAPs and Strikers. At the end of the day, our goal going to Afghanistan was to hunt down and kill Osama bin Laden.
Right.
We did that. We should have put everybody on a plane and shipped everybody home at the moment that happened. But being good Americans, we decided, hey, we're going to try to make Afghanistan a better place. And a lot of good people died trying to make it a better place.
Right.
It's not a better place today. It's the same place it was before we ever invaded.
Right.
So, history shows. You know, was it worth those lives? I mean, here's the question. Today, if I died in Afghanistan, would you say, hey, he did something to better America?
Probably wouldn't say that. No.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. So, and I was there. I would not say that.
Yeah.
So,
all right, well,
that's my answer.
all right, well, thanks for your time, Dad. I appreciate it.
All right.
You all have a good night.